If we know so much about mental health, why is it that mental health, anxiety, and depression are going up and not down? Well, allow me to get into that and how different technological changes and state of the world, and I'm not talking about COVID here, can actually impact the way that the levels of anxiety and depression that we're experiencing. Before I get into that, allow me to introduce myself. My name is Coach Carissa, and I'm a mental and emotional health coach. I'm also a practitioner of NLP matrix therapies, where I help you rewire the thoughts, habits, and emotions going on in your brain so that you can experience better mental health. So mental health is really interesting. So when the psychologists, neuroscientists take a look at the causes of mental health, really the core of it seems to stem back to negative thought processes and trauma experienced in childhood. And the thing about trauma is, and I want to make this very clear to everybody, you do not have to have a near-death experience to experience trauma. It can be something as simple as, falling down and getting hurt for the first time, or somebody not paying attention to you and you perceiving that as something to do with yourself. Trauma can be it happens to all of us, is my point. All of us experience trauma on some level that can have massive impacts for us later on in life, whether or not we realize it. So, neuroscientists, they all know about this, that trauma and negative thinking is kind of the core of poor mental health. However, we're experiencing an incline, not a decline in mental health symptoms, which is really interesting because our parenting has actually gotten better. I'm sure we're experiencing actually less trauma than we did hundreds of years ago when we had wars waging all the time. We're actually living way better lifestyles than we ever were, and yet our mental and emotional health is suffering on an even more grandiose scale. Well, that's weird. What's going on? What's the difference? So there's a couple of changes that have come about in the past maybe 20 years that I believe really affect this. And a lot of it has to do with technology, the internet, and just having more available to us. So there's couple different areas I'm going to talk about. The very first area that I'm going to be talking about that affects mental and emotional health rates and why they're going up and not down is information overload. So since 1986, studies have shown that we're taking in 5 times more information than we did in 1986. Our brains are on an information overload. They can't cope. The average scrolling time, I think people can last an average of like 3 seconds or 3 to 8 seconds on any given post. And they're scrolling for hours where they're just looking at things. There's only so much information your brain can take in. So there's a couple things happening while this scrolling is going on. Number one, the brain's just taking in a bunch of information and it's adding to these stores of things we feel we should be doing. And it's also having us compare ourselves to other people on this massive scale. So if you were to think about it, before we used to compare ourselves to, our neighbors that were in our small town or our family members. And now we're comparing ourselves to, famous people, the entire world really we're comparing ourselves to. We're seeing people putting up fantastic pictures and images of themselves. We're comparing ourselves to that. So there's this massive information overload going on, and it's causing a lot of expectations about what we should have for ourselves for the future, what we should be doing, and even just the things that we think we should be learning about or paying attention to, even if it's not important to us. And it's causing a lot of information overload and overwhelm. Our brains can't cope. It's causing a ton of anxiety and fears about the future. That's the first one, informational overload. The second one is actually a lack of community. So I think Brené Brown also talked about this, about the importance of community and feelings of loneliness. So other studies have shown that we might be more connected now than we've ever been, but we are actually the most lonely generation that has ever been. People are lonelier than ever, even though we have the guise of being more connected. And we've seen this on a lot of the things that we're scrolling, where it'll show pictures of people on their phones and they're not actually interacting with each other. They're just on their phones all the time. And what happens, so we've got this disconnect in the home space. Kids aren't getting the same attention. Kids aren't interacting the same way that they used to. We're doing everything online and we act like it's connecting us, but it's not giving us that feeling and sense of community that we actually need to be healthy, whole individuals. So as a big, massive part of mental health is that feeling of loneliness, and we can have connection. And I think it is Brene Brown who talks about this, that we can have connection on a bunch of different levels. And there might be that love connection, it might be social friendship connection, and it might be coworker relation connection and connection with your family. So if connection isn't met on all these different levels, we experience emptiness, loneliness, we start to feel disconnected from the world around us, and we don't have people to really solidify how much we're loved in that sense of self. And what that's doing is it's causing feelings of sadness, rejection, feelings of isolation, loneliness, leading to increased depression and anxiety. So these are two massive areas: informational overwhelm and loneliness, or lack of community, that are happening. People are living more and more in cities. We're online more and more. We don't have that same community connection that we did in the past. It's impacting us on a massive global scale. They're saying that 66% of the population will experience anxiety or depression at some point in their life. A lot of people are medicated to the point that they stay on medication their entire life, which might be 10, 20, 30 years without ever coming off. This stuff is impacting people on a mass level, and there are ways to get better. And number one, that starts with really simplifying your life, letting go of the things that you don't need, the things that are not important to you, and getting really clear on what is important to you, so that you can almost create a bit of clarity and simplification in your own life, and so that you can navigate today's world. I don't see the internet going away anytime soon. So how can we start to really cope in this ever-changing environment? I think it starts with simplifying, getting really clear on you, who you are, what you want, so you can start to create a community of like-minded individuals. You can simplify the things, that the information you're taking in, by getting really clear on the stuff that interests you, and really streamlining yourself in that area. And kind of, it's good to know things, but we don't need to know everything. We don't need to get involved in everything, and we don't need to be overstretching ourselves. So getting really simple in your life is the way to do it. I'm hosting a mental and emotional health workshop December 15th. It'll be all about letting go of different things that we think we need to hold on to, so that we can get simplified in our own lives and in our own selves, and we can start to build a life around that, something simple, manageable, that will improve our mental and emotional health. So that's going to be December 15th at, I think it's 9 a.m. Mountain Standard Time. Stay tuned for that. Thank you so much for watching. And remember, mindset matters.